All right. So we were talking about, last time I saw you, we were talking about militarism. And I think I might have asked it in the exam too, right? Okay. So obviously, among all the theories that we have looked at so far, all the ideologies that we have looked at so far, militarism is one of the more interesting ones. And I told you that in militarism, there is a difference that you should notice between the concept of militarization and militarism. Now, militarism is an ideology. An ideology is an idea that's institutionalized, and a lot of people subscribe to it, and the government uses that idea as an ideology to mobilize its people. Militarization, on the other hand, is not an ideology. It is a process of actions. Okay? So there's a very interesting article by Patrick Reagan from SUNY Binghamton, and he actually looks at militarization in the United States in 1994. So he defines militarization as the process through which a society becomes increasingly organized around preparation for or implementation of war. Now, you should consider society as the government or trying to organize the society. So it's mainly the government that's in charge. Who buys weapons? Who makes the decisions of buying weapons? In most democracies, it will be the government, and the decisions will be approved by the parliaments. Okay? So in that sense, militarization is a process that will be initiated by the government of a state. And once the government starts buying weapons, and hold on, buying weapons is not the only signal of militarization. What else might take place? Conscription. If you did not have conscription before, and you decided to implement conscription, you're drafting people to the military, that's another good sign. Or if you increase the number of your, not through conscription necessarily. Let's assume that you have professional army. What's a professional army?
The army that you pay for.
Okay, you actually have an army where the people sign up for the job and they get paid in return. So they're specialized, okay, they're trained. In the conscription system, there is not advanced training. In conscription, you know, you go for the military service for a long time, but you don't actually get advanced training, which is very important, okay? So do you guys remember that I told you that conscription was one tool to organize people using nationalist ideology, and the Napoleon era was a good example of it, like make people willing to die for you. That was the mentality behind conscription. And conscription is not the only way to gather a lot of people, right? You have also, in professional armies, you have also other strategies. What is a good strategy to get a lot of soldiers in your professional army?
Pay for it.
Nationalism still remains, you know, a good way to gather people, because even when, you know, people will be paid for, usually people will not want to die. So they will not necessarily want to die for the money or take the risk of dying for the money. They have to be selected from people that are more nationalistic than the rest of the population. You were saying?
Paying a good salary.
You're paying them a good salary. Okay, so if you pay in a professional army, if you pay a good amount of money to your officers, then you're actually going to have a larger military. Can you pay a good salary to all your soldiers?
To the elites by rank.
It depends by rank, and it depends on your economy. And it depends on your national defense budget, right? How much budget do you have to spend? Yes?
Also, it's relative, so if you have high unemployment.
What's that?
High unemployment, the payment doesn't have to be as high as.
Absolutely. You know, as I was teaching in the US, I had soldiers coming to college, and they were at the time, because of the timing of my presence in the US, most of them were serving in Iraq, or they have served in Iraq and then they came back. And here's the thing, none of these boys actually thought that there would be a war that they would be sent to. They signed up for the military because the military would pay for their college tuitions. And then, you know, suddenly they were drafted, they were actually sent called for duty. And they are professional soldiers, so they're not drafted, they're not conscribed, they're professional, they get paid for it, but they were sent to Iraq and Afghanistan without actually thinking that they would actively serve. Also, another person that I know, a professor actually in the US now, he was also a reserve, meaning, you know, he signed up for the professional army, and then he was in the reserves, and he never thought that he would be sent for duty. Just as he finished his PhD, he was actually sent to Iraq. That was another, exactly, another surprise for the people who didn't think that they would actually have to serve. So in terms of professional army, here's the thing. I mean, you don't always go fight. So it's actually a job that pays you, and in the meantime, you know, you don't actually go serve in a war. So it sounds like a good deal, doesn't it? In many aspects. So when there's unemployment, again, it becomes a more likable job, a more profitable job, because like I said, all you're doing is training, and there's not actual risk of getting killed. But then, you know, if your country gets into a war, or if you live in a country where there's an ongoing civil conflict, then these are the situations that are more risky for professional, serving in the professional army. Yes?
And if states provide more opportunities for soldiers in social areas?
Absolutely. So when you are a soldier, okay, if you have certain privileges, I mean, in the Turkish system, there's definitely economic perks, like privileges of being in the military, like a pension fund and like over average salaries. Well, that's only for the top ranks, right? That's not for everyone. So in the case of then militarization, the government can do several things to militarize. And I think I have already asked you the question of which country is more militarized. And then I asked you if you know of a country that uses militarist ideology. And then you said North Korea. Do I remember it correctly? Yes. North Korea was an example of a a country using militarist ideology. And then we were saying a good example of a militarized society would be? Israel. Well, Israel we gave as an example of a society that also implements militarist ideology. Every citizen is a soldier. Even, you know, women are soldiers. Everyone is considered as a soldier by the government. That fits the definition of militarist ideology, okay? In terms of militarization, if I ask you which country is more militarized, or give me examples of militarized countries, Japan. You know, last week I was at a meeting, and in that meeting, the guy from Japan said, not at all, actually, interestingly. Because Japan, constitutionally, Japan is still limited in terms of its armed forces. How much armed forces it can acquire.
So we should look or observe the countries where there are conscriptions.
Well, you should actually observe certain things that Patrick Regan mentions in his article, okay? I didn't assign you the article, but if you just search it in JSTOR, you'll find the article. In the article, I think it's in your recommended readings. In the article, he talks about several indicators of militarization. For example, you look at the number of active and reserve troops, number of civilians working in for the military, veterans, how many veterans there are participating in veteran organizations, number of civilians in defense production industries, a number of military training programs in schools. I'll get to those, but before, I'll have you watch something. Well, if you look at this, US is a militarized country. Turkey is a militarized country. Yes, China is a militarized country. Russia is okay, so the video that I'm going to show you will actually tell you that, you know, there is definitely a global militarization trend going on. Let's see.
It never stops.
America is a socialist country. Its main wealth goes to socialist enterprises, i.e. the Pentagon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, and all the rest have their fingers in the pot.
The key problem we face right now is the tremendous amount of money that's spent on the military, the global military-industrial complex.
Eisenhower, in his farewell address in the early 1960s, warned about the rise of the military-industrial complex, as he called it.
The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual.
He said that if you have a threat of unchecked power within these corporations, that it would ultimately threaten the very existence of the republic.
Other than World War II, there's never been a time in the history of the United States that so much of our resources have gone to military purposes. It's really the face of the United States to large parts of the world.
If a Palestinian in Gaza looks out the window, what does she see? She sees the bombing of a car being carried out by a Boeing plane using a TOW missile made in the US, the Apache helicopter gunships made in the US, the bullets made in the US. This entire occupation is made in the US of A. So it's not surprising that when Palestinians see what Israel's doing, they blame the United States. People around the world see it the same way.
As the United States' military budget rises, the military budgets of many other countries in the world also rise. India is going to spend billions and billions of dollars over the next decade on weapons, and so is Venezuela. And many international observers predict that over the course of the next 10 years, another dozen countries could build nuclear weapons.
this is the greatest drag on, I think, both the global economy and our attempts to push the world in a more positive direction. I mean, when we talk about the major threats that we face right now, whether it's global poverty or health crisis or climate change, those are going to require enormous expenditures. And where's the money going to come from? The only major pot of money right now is military spending.
I find this interesting because the video was showing us what? What was the setting in the video? There was a fair going on, right? So, okay, so there was all these weapons that were shown to people. And at first, you're surprised, but then, you know, if you go to any fair, any event like that, like if you go to a Christmas gift, you know, New Year gift kind of thing, that's exactly what you would find. You would find, you know, the gift samples or the gifts to buy from. So you have actually this in the setting to actually show that militarization in the world is actually quite, you know, a normalized event. It's a very normalized process. And we have actually seen that US defense spending was higher than any other nation, and many nations combined. But I want you to consider this. US actually is the first country to come up with nuclear power, and there are many other innovations in terms of its military technology that it came up with, and owing all of that to its superpower status. So it shouldn't surprise anyone that US is militarizing. Are you surprised? How about India? Were you surprised when you heard that India is becoming more and more militarized? No. You weren't surprised. Why?
There's always conflict between Pakistan and India.
Okay. So India and Pakistan conflict might be the reason that India is militarizing, right? Mm-hmm.
India is trying to be a superpower.
Okay.
India.
Do you remember? Do you remember the power transition guys? Remember, they were saying that some countries will become challengers. If they're satisfied, there won't be any conflict. If they're not satisfied with the status quo, there'll be conflict. So Kugler and Organsky and those guys argue that India is actually becoming a superpower. It's increasing its power. So in that sense, becoming a superpower or wanting to become a superpower kind of is followed by, you know, militarization. But at the same time, if you have a regional conflict that you are a part of, that also leads to militarization. So you're going to want more weapons. You're going to spend more on your defense spending if there is a conflict around you. Let me ask you about Turkey. Is Turkey a militarized country?
Well, yes. Nowadays, Turkey is also producing its own weapons.
Okay.
National weapons.
Turkey is actually quite proud to have started producing its or developing its weapons industry. So it's also seen as a part of becoming a regional or global power. So militarization and power are pretty much things that go hand in hand. And from a realist international relations perspective, it's not at all surprising that, you know, the world is militarized. It's not at all surprising that the world will become more militarized in the next 10 years, because if, as Robert Gilpin said, there is a decline in US's hegemonic power, then other states are supposed to fill in that power and challenge the United States. How will you challenge the declining superpower? Well, from a realist perspective, you try to do internal balancing, which means militarize, okay? So militarization in that sense is quite interesting of a phenomenon, because it goes hand in hand with power shifts and power struggles in the world, okay? And at this day and age, most people will argue to you that, well, you know, the best thing to do right now is to increase your power level. So the Turkish perspective is that if everyone is increasing their power levels, we should also do that as well, to just be ready. Now, here's the thing though, Greece-Turkey rivalry. So even when Turkey was not trying to become a regional power or a global power, there was the Greece and Turkish rivalry. No conflict per se, but tension from time to time, you know, dogfights and, you know, funny kind of tensions that do not add up to anything. But because of these tensions, it was possible to justify militarization in Turkey. Yes?
Turkey is like a bridge in Asia and Europe, so it has to keep their security, their own security, its own security.
This is, yeah. This is the traditional discourse, traditional government discourse. Because of our geopolitical situation and importance, and sometimes declining importance, we have to be, you know, we have to keep a larger military. Well, that's probably partly and seriously the belief that has been the belief of the governments since the establishment of the Republic. But another thing is something that we mentioned before we watched the video. If the military is strong, and if the military wants to stay strong in a country, then the military will want that country to be as militarized as possible. So militarization then is related. Guys, this is important. Militarization is related to militarist ideology. They're not the same thing, but they're very closely related, okay? So in countries where you have a strong tradition of either a military or a strong tradition of wanting to become a global power, these two factors are very important in shaping your policies of militarization, all right? Now, going back to what Reagan says, he actually argues that if we look at these different indicators, we will be able to figure out if the country is following a path, a militarization path. And in 1994, when he writes this article, he finds that US is militarizing. The video you watched is 2009, and US seemed to be militarizing. So it looks like, you know, part of being a superpower or wanting to stay as a superpower or wanting to become a new superpower is very much related to militarization. Well, remember in the beginning of the course, I was telling you that the militaries have changed a lot. At first, we had, you know, arrows and bows, and then we said that there were long bows. After a while, the people started using long bows, and then people started using, you know, other weapons, such as rifles. And then, remember, cannons were really important, especially in the American Civil War and in the World Wars. And then infantries, you know, fighting face to face with the enemy was also quite important. And then, have I actually told you that barbed wires before the First World War have become extremely important? You know what a barbed wire is? Okay, so the barbed wire is there was an extremely impressive scene in Legends of Fall. Did you guys watch Legends of Fall? Brad Pitt? I watched all Brad Pitt movies, so that's one of the better Brad Pitt movies. And in that movie, he's trying to save his brother, but the brother actually gets stuck in the barbed wire. It's a scene that I can't forget. And it's, of course, well, the death of the guy is not only because of the bullets that he took, but it was also the barbed wire. So military technology has changed over the decades and centuries, and as it evolved, the best military technology was used by the more powerful countries. And more powerful countries always innovated better and better military technology. Nuclear weapons, okay. And using the decision of using the A-bomb in Japan. We know now, we didn't know at the time, but we know now that the consequences were not fully realized. How generations and generations of people exposed to radiation would die after the A-bomb in Japan. So the full consequences were not really realized by the decision makers at the time. They knew it was horrible. They knew it was going to end the war. They knew it was a huge weapon. But at the same time, they were not aware that this would cause many generations of damage. Okay? In that sense, the nuclear weaponry, you know, a new high in the military technology, was a great sign of militarization at the time. Why is this important for today's world and for today's international system? Who's trying to acquire nuclear power? Iran is. And these days, actually, we talk a lot about Iran because Turkey actually feels, or at least started to feel in the last couple of weeks, that it's being threatened by Iran and Iran's advancing nuclear technology. Have you been following the news?
Yes.
Why is that? Why is Turkey feeling more threatened?
Turkey allowed this missile defense shield to be installed.
Mm-hmm.
So Iran said that if it were attacked, it would destroy it.
Okay. The NATO missile system is perceived as a threat by Iran. Why is that? Because Turkey is going to be actively involved in the missile defense system. And the defense system is supposed to protect NATO countries from implicitly from implicitly from Iran, right? So since that's how it's perceived by Iran, Iran believes that Turkey is in this NATO bloc that is threatening Iran's interests. Now, in the international system then, the fact that the system is militarizing more rapidly than ever in terms of nuclear weapons and in terms of conventional weapons as well, that actually becomes quite dangerous. And that actually creates the risks of a war between Iran and other countries. Okay? And there are many scenarios. You might be reading it on the papers. There are all sorts of conspiracy theories that, you know, the Arab Spring is part of this conspiracy that the United States is going to, you know, actually it's Western powers that is going to invade the whole Middle East, and that's just part of another plan. So I've actually read this a couple days ago at my flight coming back to Turkey, and it's actually quite interesting to follow that debate. But we don't really deal with conspiracy theories in our class or in our international relations department. We deal with facts, and what the fact that we have is there is constant militarization. As I said, 1990s and 2000s and this new decade now, there's constant militarization. And so if this constant process of militarization is combined or supported by the ideologies that we have discussed so far. All right, these three, okay? Militarization combined with ideologies such as social Darwinism, militarism, and the cult of the offensive is exactly what we had before the First World War and before the Second World War, okay? So if we continue in this direction, I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little pessimistic about where the whole international system is headed. So you might start thinking about what can be done, what are the realistic prevention techniques to stop this trend. Because in your second assignment, that's kind of what I'm going to ask you to do, okay? I'm going to ask you to use different ideologies to organize a hypothetical movement, and then, you know, tell us how we might actually prevent this kind of a conflict situation all over the international system. Okay, I'll put the guidelines online, hopefully before Thursday. So if you have any questions by Thursday, I will know. Okay, and on Thursday, don't forget, we're doing 2 hours and we will be at this classroom. Thank you.